They found a miner's lost letter, 110 years later. You never really think about the voices that never made it out of the dark, but sometimes they do. Sometimes someone digs a little deeper and finds one. Deep beneath an abandoned coal shaft near Scranton, Pennsylvania, it had been sealed in a rusted tin lunch pail, folded neatly beside a pocket watch and a piece of bread that had turned to dust. When they opened it, the paper trembled apart at the edges, but the words were still there, clear enough to read. It was signed by a miner named Samuel. The letter reads,
"Dearest Anna, if you're reading this, then I reckon I didn't make it home. Don't cry too hard for me, love. I want you to know that I wasn't afraid. Not really. It's dark down here, but the boys are keeping their lamps lit, and we're talking to keep from thinking too much. It is strange how quiet a man's mind gets when he knows the earth above him won to let him out again. Tell Ma I thought of her hands, the way they used to smell of bread and soap. Tell Pa that I finally fixed that latch on the shed. It was bothering me, the thought of him cussing at it every morning. I don't want him to do that no more. Anna, I can still see your face, the way you looked at the station that morning. I was halfway down the hill when you called my name and waved that handkerchief. I wish I'd turned back just for a minute to hold you once more. There's dust in my lungs and the air's growing thin. Charlie's sitting across from me, whispering something to himself, maybe a prayer, maybe to his little girl. I told him I'd write a letter too, just in case. So here it is. I don't know if anyone will find it, but I hope you do. We've been tapping on the pipe, hoping the rescue crew hears us. Sometimes we think we hear them back, and we start shouting, but it's only the echo. The earth has a way of playing tricks on you down here. It hums like it's alive. Don't be sad, Anna. You gave me the best years I ever had. Remember that picnic by the river? You said the world looked like it was made of gold that day. Hold on to that memory for me. I'll try to meet you there in my dreams. Love, Samuel.
The letter ends there. The last line trails off into a faint mark as if the pencil slipped from his hand. Those were the final words Samuel ever wrote. The paper was later examined and dated to around 1906, the same year the Primrose mine collapsed, trapping dozens of miners inside. Of the 71 men who entered that day, only 8 made it out alive. The rest were never recovered. They found Samuel's letter sealed tight in that old lunch pail, preserved by the lack of air, the same way ancient things sometimes survive under ice. It's strange, a man's whole life reduced to a few inches of paper, but when you read his words, you can almost feel his heartbeat. You can almost hear him whispering to her. And this is where it hits hardest, the thought that he wasn't thinking of himself when he wrote that. He wasn't trying to leave behind a diary or a confession. He was trying to comfort the person he loved. That's what makes it human. That's what makes it beautiful. You can imagine him sitting there in the dark, surrounded by silence so thick it feels alive, trying to make his words gentle, for her sake. The lamp's light flickering on his face, the dust settling in his hair. And still, he's calm. Still, he's thinking of home. The museum curator who handled the letter said the ink had almost fused with the paper. He said when they lifted it from the pail, a faint smell of coal and candle wax lingered. That's the thing about history. Sometimes it smells like the world it came from. But there's another detail that's rarely mentioned. Folded inside the letter was a small scrap of cloth, the corner of a handkerchief. The same kind you might wave goodbye with at a train station. Maybe it was Anna's. Maybe he carried it with him every day to remember her. We'll never really know. When I first read this letter, I didn't think about the mine or the collapse. I thought about how many people said goodbye that morning without realizing it was forever. A father kissing his children on the forehead, a wife packing lunch, a young man walking down the road in the early light, believing he'd come home for supper. And then just like that, silence. That's what this letter really is. A fragment of a conversation that never finished. There's something haunting about reading it today, because 100 years later we know how it ends. We know that rescue never came, that the tapping faded, that the lamps went out one by one. But he didn't know that yet. In those moments he still believed someone might dig through, that maybe he'd still see the sun. That's why his words carry hope even in the dark. Sometimes I think about Anna too, whether she ever got to read this, whether someone delivered it to her, or if she went her whole life not knowing what he said. Maybe she remarried. Maybe she kept waiting. Maybe she lived her days thinking he never got to say goodbye. But he did. He did. And his words found their way to us instead. And in a strange way that feels right, because now his letter isn't just his, it's ours. It belongs to everyone who's ever lost someone suddenly, everyone who's ever wished for one more word, one more moment, one more goodbye. I think that's why letters like this still matter. They're not just history. They're proof that love can outlast time, darkness, and even death. And maybe that's the lesson buried in all of this. You don't have to be remembered by the world to be remembered by someone, because here we are over a century later, saying his name, reading his words, remembering him, Samuel, and for a moment, he's alive again.